In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Well, dear ones, a couple weeks ago, I came out with a video on what to do if you're struggling with the decision between being a monastic or being a married person in the world. There's a couple things I forgot to say in that video, which I'll mention here, but I want to continue talking a little bit about the subject of relationships within the Orthodox Church. There's a couple other videos I'd like to make in the future about this, but I want to start with the topic that's in the subject line here, and that's how do you properly look for an Orthodox spouse? And with that, I'll provide some of the advice that was given to me when I was going to seminary, and this question was plaguing me as it plagued a lot of the single men there at the time. First, a couple little things that I wanted to include in the last video and forgot. When talking about marriage versus monasticism, of course, these are not the only two paths. There is such a thing as being in the world and not being married. But the question that I typically get is not that, but rather, how do I decide whether to be married or monastic? One of the things that I forgot to mention there is that this is not a decision that you have to make and then live with right off the bat. Nobody just decides one day, I'm going to be married, and they can't change that. Nobody decides one day, I'm going to be a monastic, and they can't change that. There's a reason that if you're considering monasticism, you go and live at a monastery without having become a novice yet. And different monasteries will guide you through that process. The reality is that a very good abbot or abbess will be able to guide you through that and tell you whether this is the life for you or not. So you don't need to go into this with a great deal of stress. And if you really can't figure that out, if you can't decide which way you want to go in life, then by all means, go visit a monastery and stay there for a week or even two. And then you can begin to gauge yourself and say, is this a life that I really want to seek for myself? If it is, then you get a blessing to stay even longer. And of course, even then, it's recommended that you go to different monasteries, because various monasteries have different flavors, they have different styles. You may want to find one that really suits you best, and it will be the best path for your salvation. It's the same thing with getting married, by the way. Like I said, you don't decide one day I'm going to be married and then suddenly you're stuck. You're married to that decision in a sense, but rather you hope to court someone. You hope to kind of get to know them, and along the way, you'll discover whether you share the same values and whether you're well suited for each other. Now, what I would recommend is that when you're going along that path, you want to be at least somewhat settled with the idea that you will be married, or at least that you can be married, and you're exploring that option seriously. What you don't want to do is go into it telling the person, I want to let you know that as much as I seriously want to explore our values and see if we can be married, I'm also really considering becoming a monk or a nun, and I may just decide that this is not for me and not worth it. I don't know that that's really fair to do to another person, honestly, unless they really understand that mindset, and you're going about things in not too serious of a way yet. You don't want to, in other words, string somebody along. So it's worthwhile getting to know people, becoming good friends in a sense, and they know that you're exploring those options. But they should be well aware that you're exploring those things before you get someone's hopes up, and they invest a lot into that particular relationship. So then the question naturally comes to what we're talking about in this video. People naturally ask the question, well, how do I find an Orthodox spouse? This is something that's really challenging a lot of men today who are becoming Orthodox, because so many men we see this gigantic influx of men into the Orthodox faith. We don't see as many women coming along. I think the reason for that is probably pretty practical. I think it's because men are discovering Orthodoxy by doing a lot of online research. And I don't think women tend to spend as much time doing online research into things that interest them. Men tend to get interested in philosophical and religious topics. They do a lot of online research, and men will go too far with that, in fact. What I mean by that is they'll do so in a non-relational way. They'll spend so much time during research, but very little to even no time for months or even years, not even attending an Orthodox church. What one needs to do if they're going to discover Orthodoxy online is then find an Orthodox church and develop a relationship with a priest. Women have an easier time learning things relationally. Most women who come to the Orthodox Church do so not because of online research, but because they were invited by someone. So, how is this necessarily a big problem for us, for all these young men who are looking for Orthodox spouses? Not necessarily, because if the men live Orthodoxy well, they'll become such good men, such strong men, that non-Orthodox women will be attracted to the faith. They'll say, my goodness, this faith is full of men who are actually men, who are responsible, who have a good deal of self-control, who are serious. They're not just playing at life. They're not plain adult. They are adults. They're mature and serious men, and that's what we're looking for. And women will tend to come along that way, again, because of the relationships. But men will come to me, and women too, but mainly men will come to me with a lot of anxiety about this. And they'll say, boy, the field of available women who themselves are mature, with strong morals, and a love for Christ, it seems to be that field is not very highly populated. And how do I find the right girl? And in looking for the right girl who is not already attached to somebody else and is herself not becoming a monastic, they find that there's just not a lot of available options, and they become very, very concerned about this. As I said, this was something that concerned me when I was in seminary, as it does many seminarians, because in Orthodoxy, if you're planning on being a married priest, you need to get married first and then become ordained. And so you feel like you have a little bit of a timer that's ticking by. As I get closer to the point where I might be ordained, I need to find somebody before then. So I went to a very, very good priest one day, and I asked him about this. I said, how do I go about finding the right girl? And how do I do so without a great deal of anxiety plaguing me all along the way? And he gave me advice that I will tell you I have shared with many men, and many men have benefited from this. I can't take credit for it. It was given to me. The advice I got was this. The priest looked at me and he said, stop searching for the right girl. Only worry about being the right man. He said, the time you have before you meet this girl, you have no idea how long or how short of a time that is, but it's limited. If you are going to be married, it's limited. And he said, right at this very moment, right now as we speak, God is preparing somebody to be the right wife for you. He is preparing her as we speak. She's already in his mind. So you need to use your time wisely so that you can be well prepared to be the right man for her when you meet. He said, this time you have is limited. Get married, and especially when you have children, that time is almost gone. You will never get this time again. So use the time wisely. Let God worry about finding the girl for you. You focus on you. Learn to be a more faithful, a better, a stronger, or more serious man and provider so that you are ready when God brings her into your life. That advice took all of the anxiety away from me completely. At that moment, I decided that he was completely right. To look for the right girl was not the way that I needed to go about this. I needed to spend my time worrying about being the right man. And because of that, I began taking my prayer life much more seriously, and I began taking my character much more seriously and looking for the flaws that were inside of myself that I needed to work on in order to be a good husband someday. I will tell you that I wish that I got that advice a lot sooner because there was a lot of work that was left undone. And marriage is a magnifying glass that will show you where you are lacking in your own character. And I even to this day, I will tell you there's a lot I wish I would have worked on a long time ago. Now, with that, I want to add a little bit of some additional advice to help kind of round out this video. The first is this. If you're not necessarily actively looking for a wife, it doesn't mean that you can't keep your eyes actively open. And what I mean by that is it's worthwhile having other eyes open for you. And I will tell you that there are many priests' wives, presbyteras, preoteasas, in different languages, jurias, who are very good matchmakers. And so if you have a priest wife who you trust and knows you well, it's worth telling her, be on the lookout. And if you know of anyone who you would recommend to me, let me know. My wife herself has actually matched up a few couples that have wonderful marriages to this day. And they know each other because of my wife and her recommendations. I will also tell you a little secret there are many abbesses who are also very good at this. And abbesses, and some abbots, but mainly abbesses, they're very good with relationships. They tend to know people who are very, very faithful. And they know people who have a true heart for God. And you want someone who loves Christ even more than you, as you want to love Christ even more than your spouse. So there are abbesses who, if you get to know them and you visit their monasteries often, they'll get to know you, and they may be able to help you with this as well. If nothing else, though, they can pray for you. They can pray for you, and again, you can give it to others and leave yourself to working on yourself. Now, the last piece of advice that I have may be a little difficult to hear, and it takes a great deal of humility to be able to take this advice, but I give it nonetheless. And that advice is simple. Be willing to talk to family members and friends and hear some very difficult things about yourself. It may be that part of the reason you're having a tough time with relationships is because you have some particular characteristics that make relationships difficult. It may be that you need to work on some interpersonal relationship things, or you may need to work on some things within yourself and your own character that may sting a bit when they're pointed out. So if you're open to this advice, you can't become angry about it, but it's worthwhile going to, if this has been a long journey for you and relationships never seem to work out, even if you think it's always the other person, because we always think it's the other person, but it's worthwhile sitting down with somebody and saying, listen, I'm ready to hear some really tough things. If there are some things I need to hear, I'd rather hear them right now. Now, it may turn out that you are just awkward with people. I can be very awkward with people. A lot of that has gone away since I've been a priest, but I'm still very awkward with people. I have a terrible memory. I forget both faces and names constantly. I've learned to kind of embrace my idiocy. But there are other aspects of my character that I can look back now when I was in high school, in college, and say, my goodness, I don't know, that guy was really ready for a relationship, and I don't know how well he would have worked out even with my current spouse. I don't know how we would have got along at that time. There were some things I really needed to work on in myself, and I thank God that some of those things I realized on my own. Some things I didn't. Some things I had to have some at the time what I considered pretty insulting things pointed out to me that I now look back and I'm really grateful, because there were things that probably needed to be pointed out, and there was a lot of growing up that I needed to do. There was a lot of maturing that I needed to do. So have some humility, and be willing to go to people and saying, are there some areas where I need to work on myself a little bit? Are there some things that maybe are causing some of my issues that I don't really want to see? And I'm ready to hear some things that may sting. Don't become depressed in those things. Don't think that these things can't be overcome. I will tell you that I know some very quirky people who have found some similarly quirky people, and they have great marriages. So just because some things are pointed out doesn't necessarily mean there are things that are wrong with you, but it may mean that some things need to be a little refined. And marriage will do that, but again, you may need some initial refinement in order to be ready for marriage in the first place. So that's basically the summation of my advice, those 3 points. Number one, don't constantly look for the right person, but worry about being the right person. Work on yourself. You'll never get this time again. If you become married, have children, you may spend the rest of your life looking back and saying, I wish I would have spent that time when I was single much more wisely. And you really use it to work on your relationship with Christ. Number two, be open to having other people look out for you. And number three, be willing to hear some things that sting about yourself that you may need to work on for a little bit. But glorify God that those things are pointed out, and you have the opportunity to work on them before it's too late. So do not despair. Do not despair. God knows what we need more than anything, and ultimately, our goal in this life is simply to become saints. That's the goal. And whether we have or don't have a relationship, it does not get in the way of that. We can seek to become saints every day. We can seek to love Christ more and more every day. And the more that goal fills our heart, the less anxiety we have about these other things, as much as we may desire them. And that desire becomes transfigured because we see it through the light of Christ and His working in our lives. This is how we ought to approach these things. So I pray that this little bit of advice is beneficial to you. Again, it's advice that I myself received and I found beneficial myself. So again, I hope that it's beneficial for you. In the great words of the saint of Romania, Cleopa of Sihastria, may heaven consume you. Amen.